if this was your son, how would you guys feel? Do you think that the system is set up correctly? Because it's not. Now, you guys are all in the same, you're in a position where you have power. And it's not by chance. It's not by chance my son got shot that day. It's chance because he is going to save other people's lives. Well, my question for you is, how are you guys going to show up? We need your leadership.
He started doing the door knocking. I reached out to the non-emergency line and just started that relationship. And they see if they have resources, but they really, when I'm saying there's a mental health officer and they're trying to help us, it was like more, from what I'm learning now, is more resource based. Like, oh, hey, you can get on disability, or hey, we can get you in a housing, place or something like that.
Did they ever come out and issue a 5150?
Yeah, so it took us literally 5 months to get him a 5150 because he never ever met the criteria. He was never danger himself, danger to others. So we were finally able to get that 5150 and was successful with their help, but it was still you had to criminalize them, right? So it was a thing of trying to say the right things to get them to come out.
I think that's one thing about mental health is you don't know until you're in it. And there's not a lot of information given to families about resources that aren't associated with the police departments. I mean, one of the first things we're taught is, if something happens, call the police department. Yet there's all of these other agencies and entities, and that's what they specialize in is mental health. The police department might have some resources for it, but I think as African Americans, as just people in general, we should have knowledge of these resources prior to anything even going wrong. As you said, we're taking precautionary measures. You're calling the neighbors, letting them know. You're calling the police department, letting them know just if you guys, something happens, I want to let you guys know beforehand. So even in that space, I think the duty was on the police officers. If he's not a danger to himself or others and they're coming out a few times, they should let you know, oh, well, we're not the ones to call in this scenario unless he's a danger. Call our mobile response team.
Yes, and that is true. And I feel like I think we did call them once, but we still weren't able to get, the time we were trying to get the help, it was they're no, you need to go, you still need to call 911. It was one of those things.
It's a completely broken system.
Yeah.
How many times would you say the police department came out and did not place a 5150 and then they did?
Not many times, because we really didn't want to call them. So they really did not come out very often. I mean, literally so what I know, the first time I called and tried to get a 5150, that went all bad. They let him out within 2 hours. And then, of course, now he comes home and now he basically left our house. So I was freaking out because he's like, I can't trust you guys. You call the police. And so we really didn't, as many times as the police came, after that point, I was super strategic and making sure we had the right. So I felt like we want to make sure we had all the right ingredients to call them. So I knew he had to meet that certain criteria first, even though there's a mobile crisis response.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the state of Florida, a psychiatrist cannot lift what we call it a Baker Act until the 24-hour mark after it's been initiated. So that's not the same rules for the 5150. Someone can lift it within 2 hours.
That's the thing. If they're taking him away in that space and he's placed on a 5150 and he's meeting the criteria, I wonder what happened in that meantime. That's a lot. You didn't have they didn't educate you with the resources as you were making calls, precautionary calls. When they came out and didn't place him on a 5150, you weren't given any information about the mobile response team in lieu of calling the police department. And then when he was placed on a 5150, He was released within 2 hours.
Flowers.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And that's the problem. Yeah.
he was placed on a 5150.
Uh-huh.
And later, 3 months later, they decided to press charges on him because he had a pocket knife. But in his 5150, he wasn't necessarily using it on anyone.
No.
Even if he was, his mental health caused those impairments or those behaviors. So to help the family, if he has a charge and I, as a legal entity, can help the family, okay, let me help the family and take some of the burden off their plate, and I'll tell him he has to go to a program, he has to seek therapy or treatment and prove it for 3 months to ensure that he's stable, and then we'll go ahead and drop the charges. It handles all three.
Absolutely. So that's why we were thinking, like, and I haven't even, I mean, one would think, right? All that. Yeah. So on June 1st, Miles is like totally like talking to him, not talking to himself, but just like totally thinking he's Jesus. He's walking around, he's working in the garden, and he's, digging up stuff, and he's just like sweaty everywhere. And it's like, so I called because it was the day before he was doing all that. So I was like, I'm going to call this non-emergency line again. I'm going to make sure they know, like, look, Miles is having some delusions, and you probably are going to get calls from our neighbors because they're going to be like wondering what's up with him. And I even called the officer that I had been working with, left her a message because I had her cell phone number, left her a message, and and I spoke to a sergeant, called me right back after I called the non-emergency line. He called me and he's like, hey, yes, I was actually at your house when we had that 5150, and I know exactly, I remember Miles. Yeah, I was there. And so that was explaining what was going on with him. That would have been an excellent time for him to tell me about the mobile crisis, because there was actually something, but that would have been an amazing opportunity for someone on the non-emergency line to tell me, hey, have you tried this? Did you call this or do that? Number one, that would have like saved Miles' life. And that was never even an option. No one even brought that up to me. Yeah. So left
Was he medicated at this point at all?
Nope. No, he wasn't. And he was, after he got up to 5150, one of his criteria, and he was like in a residential treatment program. So he went to like a Kaiser thing for like 10 days. And then it was a while. He was there, like maybe 7 days, maybe 10 days he was gone total. And then he went to like a residential treatment kind of thing for another like 10 days. So he was gone from our house like 24 days or something. But our requirement for him to come home was that he had to take one of those shots because he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder.
Yeah.
And it was like literally night and day. Like he was amazing, like I said, doing all that stuff, but not on medication at this time on June 1st, definitely not. And so I left her a message too. And then the next day, that's when it's just like everything went kind of array, right? Because he never has been aggressive at all or even anything. And he wasn't even, he broke a window, right? So he broke a sliding glass door, and that was like so out of character. He's literally like anything's never happened like that. So he broke the window, and he broke a window with a garden tool. So he was, as I explained, the day before he was gardening, and he was digging up some stuff, and my neighbor was like, hey, it looks like you need some help. I have this great, garden tool. So like I said, everyone loved Miles and like wanted to help him out. So he gave him the tool, and that's what he used to break the thing. And that's what you'll hear when they say he had like a spear. So I don't know what they're calling it, all kinds of things that aren't what it was. So he broke it. So my mom was in the back. She was living with us at the time. She made the first call to 911. She called to get her grandson help, and she said he has a mental illness, and he needs help. So we all leave the house, and then so then I make the call as well, And I'm trying to explain to them, I called you yesterday, but they're keep interrupting me and asking all these questions. And so I explained what happened and that he was having medical emergency. But also, I was frightened too, I wasn't afraid that I just didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I never seen him break anything. I never seen him do anything. So we were getting help for him. And then they're shooting right away. So it's beanbags and then gunshots. So it's like you had this one, everyone overreacted. Like they shouldn't even been beanbagged at that time. Like, yeah. So then he was shot 4 times. And then the officer that arrived, who was on her way, they didn't wait for her. She's now there with her taser in her hand, but it's too late because he's already been shot. So she got there too late. They didn't even wait for her.
The story we read made it seem like the officer was present before the shots were fired. Really, no de-escalation, no prompting the
Not even waiting for
the appropriate officer.
Yeah, the specialized officer to get there.
Yeah, they just didn't wait. They fucked up. They just took his life, and nothing needed to happen for something like property damage and for what happened and how much space they had and how much, and then they're like trying to say, oh, well, he was talking to one of your neighbors. Yeah, he was talking to my neighbor. My neighbor wasn't like, didn't think he was gonna like hurt him. They got scared when they came on the scene with guns. They were scared of the police. They were scared of Miles.
I'm gonna ask you a very difficult question. So if they had prior knowledge, right, and he wasn't threatening, why do you think the police officers shot your son?
Oh, because of implicit bias. Because they see this black man in the street. Race is definitely involved.
Okay.
You don't do all this groundwork for the race not to be involved. So, it's absolutely, it's implicit bias. And that's why now we're trying to work with the police department. My group, that FOSAF group, is trying to work with the police to change their policies, get more training, implicit bias.
Could you speak more about that group and just say that acronym one more time?
Yeah, so FOSAF, Friends of Scott, Alexis, and Taun Hall. And so that group was created by one of my friends, Shyama, who, was outraged, as many people are. So we have like people who are working on mental health. We have people who are working on implicit bias. We have people who are working on legislation. They've had about 18 meetings over the last year with the city. So they're meeting with the city manager, but at this point they haven't really done anything. We're like, what if if you had the same situation, what would be different? How have we made change? And they haven't done enough. They haven't done anything. So now we're ready to kind of gear things up because we have more momentum now with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and all the things that are happening in the nation. And there's a lot of people who are protesting and coming behind our story now, even though they weren't before. It's just a lot more attention on Miles.
Are there any African Americans in your community providing the type of services that you feel you need?
Yeah, I had to kind of go outside the group. So I ended up finding somewhere that's in Richmond, which is like about 20 miles from here. And I went there but that, again, it was a community that I felt more comfortable with because there were people who've been shot, not necessarily by the police, but it was like street violence, but at least the families understood the trauma of being shot and losing a child. So I felt like I was in the right place there, and I still do interact with them, and I feel like it is good for me to be with that community. I feel a lot more comfortable because it's so different losing. It's tragic to lose a child from cancer, and absolutely, or any death, right? But to be murdered when you're trying to get your help, obviously you're going to have different emotions about that. You live literally like the American dream, right? We live like in a really nice house, and but it doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter. The way when you're Black in America, the way people see you, you just somehow, and you also, for me, like I had a false sense of security, right? So I felt like, letting them know and being engaged and somehow it was going to be it would be a different outcome. I was worried for him if he went to different other areas, you know, like went to visit my mother-in-law. I was worried because the police don't know him there.
Sure. I mean, I think we all start getting that false sense of security, thinking, you know, in society, the more education we get, or we start moving out of certain kind of areas, like, oh, you know, and then, I mean, reality hits that we're all Black.
Before we let you go, Mrs. Hall, could you just share the name of your organization, so that our followers, our viewers can log on and get more information?
Yeah, so it's justiceformileshall.org. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll be on Twitter. Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys started this foundation, because the education and getting the message out there is extremely important.
No, I mean, absolutely. We just want to be able to save other families from the kind of score that we've had and that we are going to continue to have, right? Because, you know, it's a constant reminder that he isn't here, but we will definitely, you know, make change this way. So, but thank you guys for the opportunity.